Hey, another week, another live stream. Welcome. So, in this one, I want to break down my secret strategy to build muscle on a plant based diet because this has become one of my number one questions. Even though I started this channel and continue this channel talking about weight loss stuff, and of course, that's my wheelhouse primarily. This has become one of the number one questions over the years as I've documented my physique journey and my progress. And actually, to be honest, that's one of the cool things about social media that I do definitely take for granted. I get to run the experiments in my life, post about the results, and you guys let me know if you want to hear more about it. And this is something it seems like a lot of you want to hear more about. So let's do it. I've got 8 steps that I'm going to walk you through that I consider to be critical to my muscle building journey over these recent years. And just as proof of concept here, let me put a few little photos on the screen here so you can see that even after I lost the weight some years ago, we've built just a little bit of muscle. Now you have to take these photos with a pinch of salt because lighting, I've got that muscle pump from the workout, but you can quite clearly see here that, yeah, after I lost the weight, I was perfectly slim, perfectly light, really happy with it. But versus today, or actually some of these photos, they're a little bit outdated. I've got a more recent one in a second I can show you. But you can see we've had this just slow, progressive muscle building development over the years. I am a little bit leaner as well nowadays, which creates or reveals a little bit more separation and definition in the muscle, which can actually make you look more muscular. So some of this is just an illusion because I'm a little bit leaner than 3, 4, 5 years ago. But I think definitely it's fair to say I've put on a little bit of muscle mass here. Where's that more recent one? Okay, here we go. I think you've all seen this photo. I posted it the other day. And again, the leanness does make a difference because I don't actually have that much more muscle mass than this particular photo here, which is not too many years ago. This one is 3 years ago versus 2019, 2020. But what that leanness does is, again, provide the illusion of muscularity, but definitely every year I've put on a couple of pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but a couple of pounds of muscle, but on a leaner frame, on a leaner physique, that does make you look more muscular. So bit of proof of concept here, like this is what I've done. And obviously I've documented it, and then I subsequently get lots and lots of questions about it. So today we're going to run through, precisely what I feel has worked for me, what hasn't worked, dispel some of the myths, especially about the plant-based protein stuff, and really I want to explain a lot about what to focus on because there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of fluff that people think that you need when it comes to building muscle. And I just want to cut through that and really make it very simple as to my experience. And again, my wheelhouse, this is the disclaimer, is weight loss. That's my expertise, but I have learned a lot I have a lot of experience now with muscle building, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, built a lot more knowledge on it. And then, of course, combine that with the plant-based anecdote, the plant-based experience doing it. Hopefully, this will all be useful today. So step number one is, let's do this one first. Let's get this out of the way. Let's check this off the list, protein. Right, protein matters. But really, when it comes to muscle building, I actually don't think it's people's biggest bottleneck. I don't think it's the bottleneck people think. And we're going to talk about what I think is the elephant in the room when it comes to muscle building in a second. Hint, hint. Most people don't train right. Most people are going in the gym and they're not doing the correct stuff. And actually, I'm not going to say protein is secondary to that, but because that's not quite true. They both work in tandem. But the stress, the emphasis that a lot of people place on protein. My nutritionist told me I need 150 grams of protein per day. And these people are not even doing the right stuff in the gym. This drives me nuts. So just to contextualize, protein matters, but I really don't think it's a bottleneck. And you can easily get enough to build muscle on a plant-based diet. And you probably don't need as much as you think, is my experience. So let me break this down for you. Firstly, let's get this out of the way. I aim for 120 to 140 grams of protein per day. Now, you should not use this as your own personal target. I'm going to talk about how to work out your personal target in just 2 minutes, so stick with me. This because people always ask me, Ryan, how much protein do you eat? And I want to give an honest answer to be transparent. So I feel like I have to do that. I'm obligated to do that. But I also always caveat it with, that doesn't mean that should be a guiding light or a North Star for you. It may be too high. in many cases versus many people in my audience. Actually, for some people, it's going to be too low. Actually, a 6'3" chap that maybe already has a decent level of muscle mass, the amount of protein that I'm feeding myself might not be sufficient for him for further muscle mass. So let's separate my target from what your target should be. Do not use it as a guiding light, but I always want to answer this question honestly. 120 to 140 grams of protein per day. In fairness, I talk about this all the time. I'm very transparent about this. What should you calculate for you? Rough guide, I think what I've landed on is about 1.2 grams to 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight and protein per day. That didn't make sense. 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day is what I meant to say. This is lower than the standard 2. The standard in the muscle building community, the 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, roughly translating, you'll hear this a lot, to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, because kilos and pounds, it's not quite 50%. It's not quite half the amount, it's like 45%. But that is often the sort of heralded guidance, the common trope in the muscle building, gym bro, bodybuilding community. I think that's excessive. People that I look up to in terms of having an academic research outlook on muscle building seem to be very convinced that the upper end of protein synthesis is actually lower than the 2 grams per kilo of body weight per day. Without getting so lost in the numbers, what I'm meaning by that, in layperson's terms, is at some point, it seems, anecdotally I've experienced this, but that's not a thorough experiment, of course, but it seems as though at some point there's a diminishing rate of returns for more protein. So when we talk about muscle building, we can, as a rule of thumb, say more protein is better. More protein will give you a greater chance of adding muscle mass to your frame. Yes, we can say that, but simultaneously at a certain point, there's a diminishing rate of returns to how much an extra 30, 40, 50 grams of protein per day might get you. Does that make sense? In other words, you only get the benefits of eating loads and loads of protein as it happens for muscle building for so long. Now, there's other benefits to protein too, not just as a function for building muscle, but at some point there's a diminishing rate of returns. There's a cap to it, a ceiling, let's say. Does that make sense? And so I believe I've landed on that ceiling might be around 1.6 to maybe more like 1.8 grams of protein per kilo. So I don't think you need to go to 1.8, just to be clear, because I'm inserting all kinds of numbers here for the note takers. I think a rough guide for beginners who want to build some muscle, even intermediates, is 1.2 grams to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day. So for example, if you are 70 kilos, I'm 72 kilos, so it's easy, crunch the numbers for me. If you are 70 kilos, what would 1.2 be? That would be 85, north of 85 approximately grams of protein per day. At the lower end, up to what is 1.6? I mean, it's going to be about 110 grams, isn't it? It's going to be about, I'll let you crunch the numbers, otherwise this live stream is going to be really long. But yeah, you don't need loads. In other words, you don't need loads, especially as a beginner when your body is going to be hyper responsive. But yes, it's important to get enough for the muscle and tissue growth and repair. And yes, you could be wasting, quote unquote, the gym is useful, lifting weights is useful in other ways beyond building muscle, but you could be wasting efforts from a muscle building perspective, at least, by doing all the right stuff in the gym, but then you're not taking care of the protein. So I don't want to downplay the protein, but I also think it's mightily overemphasized in today's nutrition discourse. So I'm just trying to find the sweet spot in communicating my view on protein between those things. So there's your range anyway to work with. And it's not to say that 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day won't work, won't be beneficial, and that's necessarily where the diminishing rate of returns will start. It just looks as though scientifically protein synthesis you can't tap into the benefits of protein synthesis proportionally more and more and more the higher protein you go. Does that make sense? There is kind of ceiling's the wrong word because it suggests that nothing happens above the ceiling. You could go through that proverbial ceiling and maybe eke out a little bit of extra muscle growth from an extra 10 grams of protein per day beyond my measurements. So, but it's only to say that At some point, you're going to be displacing something else in your diet. So if you're reducing the fat and the carbs to maybe an unhelpful degree in other ways, restricting those nutrients, bringing harm to your diet, harm to your body in different ways by trying to restrict those nutrients because your protein is so high, at some point you've got to have a question about, oh, what is that extra 20 grams of protein a day really worth to me if I could actually fill that with some healthy fat sources because I haven't had so much healthy fat today. You know what I mean? And get the nutrients and the subsequent benefit from those fat nutrients. Does that make sense? So like, what are you sacrificing in your diet would be a greater question. So yeah, you can build muscle on less if protein is solid. Like if your training, is solid. Like I know guys who are heavier than me that actually have a decent amount of muscle mass than me that actually do like more of a raw vegan thing. I know full well they eat less than 120 to 140 grams of protein per day. I know full well, and they're more jacked than me, and they're lifting heavy weights in the gym. They're stronger than me, so it is possible. But I would just say like it's best not to judge based on outliers. Also, there is a lot of performance enhancing drug use on social media, influencing profiles in bodybuilding circles. And so you don't want to be comparing to those folks either, because yeah, somebody that's taking TRT is very likely to make much better muscle gains than me, even eating less protein than me because of the effects of the TRT. Does that make sense? So make sure you're not comparing to outliers too much. Generally speaking, more protein is going to be an advantage from a muscle building perspective. You don't need as much as you think, but it does need to be decently high, certainly decently higher than somebody that isn't trying to build muscle. That's worth saying. But don't aim for such a high protein intake that you're displacing other good nutrients in your diet. The amino acid conversation, I've talked about this before, but we'll do this very briefly. Your body pulls amino acids over the course of the day. It banks them. And so it's important to remember that you don't digest food immediately after you chew it anyway. It depends on the composition of the food, the fiber content, the thermic effect, the composition of the different macronutrients in a meal, and vitamins, minerals in a meal as well. That's going to dictate how slowly you digest that food, and then it metabolizing. Lost my train of thought slightly. So it's not as though you need every little bite of food that you eat, every snack or meal to have a perfect balance or a perfect range, let's say, of amino acids for muscle building. That's really not essential. And this muscle that I've built, this little bit of muscle I've built progressively each year since about 2022 now, 2023 anyway, at the latest, is I have the amount of thought that I've given to, oh my goodness, this is a meal that maybe isn't as balanced as in amino acids as the last meal I had. Zero. Like I've never had to think about this. I've never had to worry about this. So I really don't think every meal needs to be perfect or anything from an amino acid perspective. Like I say, you're not digesting food instantaneously anyway. So over the day, you're getting all this array of amino acids from different foods. Tofu got a complete range anyway. Soy products have a complete range anyway. But as you're digesting it, on different time scales as well, and food is meeting in your digestive tract, well, that's going to be really, that might be post-metabolization anyway, but that anyway is going to be really helpful in just ensuring, like, over the day, if you have a variety of plant foods or a variety of protein sources, I'm going to talk about my favorite protein sources in just a sec, next point, but you're going to be fine from an amino acid perspective is what I'm trying to say. So on those favorite protein sources, again, whatever floats your boat, whatever you enjoy that's still healthy, of course, because there are lots of vegan meat alternatives that are not necessarily healthy, but they have a really high protein count. So I wouldn't recommend those. Really high in saturated fat, very ultra processed, highly calorific. Yeah, they might be high in protein, but they're also then highly calorific fake meats and whatnot with all the added chemicals, nasties. It depends on the product in question. Like I can see there are some sort of fake meat products that you think, well, lower in saturated fat. They don't have the oils. They don't have coconut oil especially. And actually the calories are relatively in check. Like that's not too bad as a fake meat goes. I do occasionally find those things. I don't enjoy so much of those things because what you find is the fiber is compromised. You might not get as much fullness as you would from like legumes or from tofu or tempeh or TVP even. So I don't like to have too many fake meats, but will I sit here and say I never eat fake meat, have a vegan burger for a bit of fun every now and again? No, of course not. What a lie that is. You've seen me eat out. You've heard me talk about this before. But generally speaking, my favorite sauces are going to be the more whole foodsy sauces. Tofu, tempeh, I've mentioned these already. Seitan is another really good one. Shout out to Seitan. Wonderful protein to calorie ratio. Amazing protein to calorie ratio, as does TVP, by the way, rehydrated soy, mince, curls, in other words. Well, it's not the same as TVP precisely, but these things that you rehydrate by soaking in water, like these are disgusting to people. Like astronaut food is what I used to call it. I was like, oh no, I can't stand that. Don't like that. Actually, they are an absolute cheat code. And I wish I wasn't such a stubborn old git about trying TVP for the first couple of years of my being vegan, because it really is a game changer. Because again, it allows you protein boosts. It's really versatile. Yes, it's really bland, but if you actually flavor your food correctly, it doesn't need to be. If you marinate stuff correctly, if you use nice dressing, sauces, herbs, spices, it doesn't need to be. If you put TVP in meals nice and early, like chilies and bolognese and things like this, it absorbs it all. It's like it's like tofu. It's a blank slate. It's totally neutral, and it can be mushy, but it depends how you cook it. You could also then, after you've soaked the TVP, fry it, and that's how to get it so it's not mushy. That's how I do it in my tofu stir fries, and then it gets crispy like crispy tofu would after the appropriate cooking time and method. So yeah, beans, lentils, yes, they're lower in protein, but is it true they're not a protein source? This is ludicrous. I hear this on Instagram all the time from someone like the vegan gym bros, who I vehemently disagree with on this subject. They say beans are not a protein source. Beans, like any food, are a source of any nutrient they contain, right? There's some nuance there. Now, if you say beans are maybe not as advantageous in terms of protein to calorie ratio as something like tofu, yes, I'll agree, but people don't make that point. They make these ridiculous binary statements on social media that really confuse people. So they run around saying beans are not a protein source. Beans are incredible. Beans, and even if they weren't a protein source, I'd be eating lots of beans anyway. I don't only eat beans as this is going to help me get my protein. As all of these foods have other benefits, tofu rammed with a bunch of nutrients. I don't just eat it because of protein, but that's an aside. So yeah, beans don't have loads and loads of protein. So I would say if you're trying to build, it's perfectly fine if you don't care about building muscle, but you're not watching this video, of course. But if you are trying to build muscle right now and your major protein sources are beans or lentils, yes, I think you probably are missing a trick. And something like seitan, TVP, obviously this is more challenging if there's soy allergies, if you have bad reactions to certain things, gluten, so you can't have the seitan. That's when you might turn to a clean plant protein powder, which they do exist. Shout out the Sun Warrior range, love their stuff. But that's when you might turn to those. So there are some limitations. And again, this is going to be quite repetitive, but is it any more? Because the options I mentioned, they're kind of either soy derivatives, and then you got soybeans, TVP. They're all kind of similar-ish, right? Maybe you branch out with something like seitan, but seitan isn't that widely available, in fairness, and it can be quite expensive, in fairness. So yeah, you are limited, especially if you combine that with an allergy or a dietary restriction in some way. That's where I said like a clean plant protein powder can be your best friend to just get an extra 20, 30 grams of protein here. And their soy milk is really good as well. So really high protein count too versus the other plant milk. So just throwing on a bit of soy milk to the appropriate meals that you might have milk with instead of almond milk. It's going to come with more calories, but it's going to offer more protein as well per volume. So there are ways to add protein to your diet quite subtly, actually. Nutritional yeast, a couple of grams of protein per tablespoon. And remember, everything contributes to your protein intake. So the decent amount of, I think per cup, we're talking 8 or 9 grams of protein in rolled oats. That cup of rolled oats that you have in the morning with your breakfast, there's still 8 or 9 grams of protein there. Never mind the other bits. If you then add soy milk, if you then add hemp seeds, that's going like this before you even have an obvious protein source. Does that make sense? There's a big misconception is people look at their diet and go, oh my goodness, especially plant-based diets, oh, I'm not getting enough protein. I heard I need, one of these ridiculous binary random numbers, 100 grams of protein protein. 120 is the one that's often cited. I need 120 grams of protein per day, but I'm looking at breakfast. I've got no obvious protein source there. Yeah, but it might be 15 grams of protein anyway as a baseline. And yeah, you might need to add protein to it for the sake of muscle building, but you might not be as far away as you think because everything contributes. Does that make sense? So this is all step number one. I didn't want to spend so long on it, but I'm glad we have to go to the micro detail. Yes, protein matters in other words, but it's not the bottleneck everyone thinks, and your training needs to be on point. And we're going to come to how to get that right shortly. Again, all this worry, all this paranoia, the protein paranoia, all this scaremongering around protein, it is so ludicrous if your training is not correct anyway. So I think that's more of a prerequisite. I should be careful to say secondary because, like I say earlier, they kind of work in tandem. You need them both to come together, and it's not like one is definitely more important than the other from a muscle building perspective. They come together, they work in unison, but one is the training, right? That's the stimulus. One is the replenishment. That's the nutrition. So yeah, you need both of those things to happen. But like the concern about the protein from people who don't either A, lift weights or lift weights correctly is ridiculous in my experience and opinion. Step number 2, getting lean. Getting lean changed everything for how my physique looks. And yes, this video is about muscle building, and I'm not going to focus so much on fat loss here. You have my word, I promise. I've got 500, 600 plus videos where I do that enough on this channel. But what I do wish to say is muscle looks, in my opinion, muscle looks so much better if body fat is low. You have the definition, you have the separation, you can see the insertions better. You can have loads and loads of muscle, but if you have a higher body fat percentage covering, therefore subsequently more body fat covering that muscle, you might not look muscular at all. You might look large, you might look big, might look like you have mass in a t-shirt, you might look like one of those big bulked up gym bros, you might well have loads of muscle underneath. You'll actually find that you look more muscular and better. And you can say beauty is subjective. I really think most people look better leaner. They look more muscular leaner because you can see all the insertions. What's an appropriate body fat percentage to best reveal this? There's nuance here. It's going to be slightly different. It depends what your standard is. It depends how deep you want to go with this. It depends how serious you want to take this. But men, you're looking at 14, 15% or below. Women, 24% and below. And that's going to reveal a bit more of the muscle separation anyway. I mean, you're not going to have really chiseled popping abs, men, until you're maybe 12, 13% body fat or low. But 15, you're going to start to see some of that musculature, right? You're going to start to reveal some of that. So yeah, you can have all of this muscle underneath, but if there's a layer of fat that's fluffing you out, that's giving you that softer look, I don't know. I don't think it looks as good. So the point being that, yes, muscle building is the goal of this video. That's what we're talking about today. It shouldn't come at the cost of maintaining a low body fat. And we're going to talk about how to balance the two in just a second. The point I'm making, one point I'm inferring here is you don't actually need that much muscle mass to look athletic when you're lean. And that's another cheat code as well. Leanness, again, creates this illusion of muscularity, the separation, the definition. You can see the shoulder insertions. It makes you look more muscular with your top off, shirtless. With your top on, you might look like a smaller entity than the really bulked up person, for example. But this is exactly why I don't push the aggressive bulking all the time, the dirty bulking, because that's exactly what I used to do in the past. And I'm like, oh, it's not worth the trouble to build some muscle, yes, but to put on all this fat with it that I eventually have to lose, no, that's much harder. Thank you very much. I'm not doing that anymore. You don't need that much muscle to look incredible, is the point I'm trying to make, if you are lean enough. So for me, what's worked really nicely and the pendulum has swung back and forth as I've kind of learned how to balance these over the years. And that's what I'm trying to share here, precisely how I've done that. But this combination of adding a little bit of muscle mass, as I've done pounds and pounds of muscle mass to my frame over the last couple of years, plus lowering my body fat just a little bit after my initial plant-based weight loss 10 years ago, just progressively chipping away a little bit each year of that body fat. Marrying those two things, I actually think I look better. Again, subjective, but I don't know, the feedback seems to follow. I actually think I look better like that than the very, very bulked up version of me that might actually have more muscle mass. Does that make sense? But loads of excess body fat. So that's step number 2 is, this should not come at the cost of maintaining a low body fat. And I'll talk about how to marry the two in a second. Getting lean changed everything for how my physique looks, not just adding the muscle. It was this combination of let's add a little bit of muscle, but let's keep it lean. And then you're going to look incredible without having to spend years and years in the gym and get on the steroids to speed up your journey or anything like that. Because being lean makes you look really muscular anyway. It's quite surprising. Step number 3 here then, in my secret plan that's now not so secret to build muscle on a plant-based diet. Let's talk calories, this big question of do you need a calorie surplus to build muscle? My short answer, my hot take on this is it's not a prerequisite. Having a surplus of calories is not mandatory to build muscle, but I would say that you are more likely to guarantee that you are building muscle in a calorie surplus. I have to say that. 2 reasons why. One, because calorie surplus implies you're eating more protein. Though, of course, this depends on the composition of your diet, but let's suggest that they come together. They come, again, in tandem. More calories you eat, likely more protein you eat. In other words, that's going to help. Number 2, second reason why a calorie surplus is going to better guarantee that you're building muscle on a plant-based diet. You're going to be properly fueled, for your training. And training can be much harder. Lifting weights can be much harder when you feel flat, when you feel weak, when you hit the point of fatigue quickly. In a calorie deficit, you're more likely to have those effects in a calorie deficit because you're trying to purposely use the stored body fat as fuel and therefore hold back from giving yourself full nutrition needs at maintenance. So yeah, it can be hard, basically, in other words, because that was a bit word salad what I've just said there. So in other words, it can be hard to, how do I want to word this? It can be harder to have really effective training when you're in a calorie deficit versus a surplus. Does that make sense? So for all of those reasons, my short answer in summary to this question of do you need to be in a calorie surplus to build muscle is no, it's not a prerequisite. It's not mandatory. But for those reasons, you're probably more likely to guarantee it. That said, personal anecdote time. I've spent the vast majority of the last 12 months in either A, a calorie deficit, or B, at maintenance. The amount of days I've had in a calorie surplus in the past 12 months is very minimal. It's probably less than 10 to 12 out of 365. So that's why I say it's not a prerequisite, because I've definitely added a couple of pounds of muscle in the last 12 months. So no, it isn't mandatory whatsoever. So can you build muscle in a calorie deficit? And therefore, subsequently, because you're in a calorie deficit, losing fat. So can you build muscle and lose fat at the same time? Because this is another question I get often. Yes, is the answer, but it's less likely / harder for all the reasons I've just mentioned. And what you'll find is if you're trying to do this, all of your ducks nutritionally really have to be in a row to get this right, to pull this off. Or you're a beginner. And again, you hyper respond in the gym and you have that sort of beginner newbie gains that people talk about in the gym bro world. So that might be an exception. But if you're already pretty experienced with strength training, yeah, it is going to be quite tough, I can see, to build a significant amount of muscle in a calorie deficit, but it's not impossible. It can be done, but you really need to be on it with nutrition. But I'm discussing how you do that now, so it is possible. Either way, common theme here, it's me, so I don't lose the whole slim and sustain, slow and steady wins the race shtick, even if we're talking about muscle building today versus losing weight. But either way, no extremes. No extremes. So if you do select to run a calorie surplus or even eat at maintenance, not eat at maintenance, if you do want to run a calorie surplus to just give you like a little bit more chance to build muscle, make it a small one would be my advice. That's what I found to be beneficial. If you run a deficit, if you choose to run a calorie deficit because you want to chisel down a little bit, you still do want to build a bit of muscle, make it a really small one. Make sure your protein is on point, as we discussed in step number 1, but make that calorie deficit a really, really small one so that you're not lacking too much energy. The glycogen stores are still decent. You still have a reasonable amount of glycogen in your system to push yourself hard in those sessions. You're not hitting fatigue too early, so you can make the most of those sessions. You're not running such a small deficit that it drags your total protein intake down. Again, you get what I mean? Like these radical swings and the pendulums where you're risking like even losing muscle because you're underfeeding yourself in a harsh calorie deficit, or overfeeding yourself and yet brilliant, you're in a calorie surplus. So yeah, you're probably building a good amount of muscle, but you're putting on loads of body fat as well that you're eventually going to have to lose anyway. And it's not going to feel like, this is how I felt when I was building muscle. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like in my gym bro days 10, 12 years ago when I went to university, when I was gaining all of that body fat. I need an origin story video that I linked to here, but I was gaining all of this fat, but I was definitely building muscle. It didn't feel that great for that long because I could so see that I was putting on body fat that I was like, the juice wasn't really worth the squeeze anyway. I was excited at first because I was like, oh, I'm getting bigger. And I thought I was getting bigger because I was only building muscle. And then a couple of months in, I'm like, no, I'm fat. The love handles are coming here. I'm over the belt. I'm adjusting. I'm going to a new belt hole every month. This is not, I'm looking fatter in the face. I don't really like this. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. So if you run a deficit, make it a small one. If you run a calorie surplus to give yourself a little bit better chance to build some muscle, just make it a small one. So that is my attitude to this day. And yes, maybe it leads to slower progress. I concede in the muscle building department, this actually definitely holds me back, but I don't care. This is a core value I won't compromise on because of everything I've just said about my experience. My attitude to this day is build muscle while staying relatively lean. That's my attitude. Maybe that's not the one that worked for you. Maybe that's not the most efficient route. Maybe a serious bodybuilder would look at that and say, well, that sounds good, Rye, but you might build a couple more pounds of muscle if you're in a larger calorie surplus to just ensure that your training is on point, that you're getting adequate protein. I'm like, no, thank you very much. The juice isn't worth the squeeze for me. I don't really want to do that. So that is step number 3. Step 4 here. Where are we? Oh yeah, step 4 is training intent versus just showing up. Most people you see in the gym, they're just moving weights. They're just moving weights. That's not the goal. They're going through the motions. They're taking the weight from A to B. And really what we want here to stimulate muscle growth, to signal muscle growth, is tension being applied to the muscle. So that's the goal. So we want to stretch, squeeze, control the weight with proper form. And we want to be thinking, am I actually working the muscle here? Am I actually pushing the muscle here? Not just, did I complete the rep by moving it from A to B? Not just, am I turning up to the gym and picking up some weights and putting them down? Did I really work the muscle group that I'm trying to work in this session or with this particular exercise? That intentionality, right? Versus just going in the gym and then feeling really good about yourself because you're going in the gym. Now, if you're not that serious, I mean, you wouldn't be watching this anyway. If you're not that serious, it doesn't matter, does it? It wouldn't really matter if you're just going to, that's great. I see a lot of people in the gym, they're not super serious. So they don't mind if they're, not hitting PRs or if they're just stopping at 10 reps, even though they've got maybe another 5 in the tank. They're not super pushing themselves. Their form isn't perfect. As long as they're not doing anything form that's really dangerous or unsafe. There is wasted opportunity there from a muscle building perspective. And I see it all the time. But if they don't care and it's just a bit of fun, bit of movement for them, and they just want to maybe, I don't know, burn a few calories, and, they're taking care of their diet, they're already in pretty decent shape, fine. It's no drama, is it? But that's not the purpose of this video. We're actively trying to build muscle here, give us the best possible chance of doing so. We want to go in with training intent, and not just go through the motion. So good form is really important to master good form before adding weight. This is something I overemphasize. I emphasize a lot to this day. Don't rush to add more weight. It's what I said to my buddy that came to the gym with me the other day. Don't rush to add, because he was asking questions about when is the right time to move up the weight. Don't rush to add more weight if you haven't nailed the form, basically. That's the first and foremost thing to master. Get the form down. Watch the exercise tutorials, hire a personal trainer, a credible, a decently experienced personal trainer if you need to. Get the form. I learned from YouTube videos, like 12 years ago, really inefficient, really, really helpful, actually. Maybe a decent personal trainer would have halved my learning time and early injuries and that kind of thing. Yes. But initially, I just learned from YouTube videos. So watch those exercise tutorials, learn the form first. My first year in the gym, I hardly built muscle. And that's actually really hard to do because honestly, as a beginner, like I've indicated throughout, you're really hyper responsive. You can have bad form and still build some muscle because your body just isn't used to that training stimulus versus when you're 2 years into lifting weights. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't respond. So it's not so hyper responsive, let's say. So that's really hard to do. Like, I didn't build muscle hardly in my first year lifting weights when my form was bad. It doesn't matter how much you're moving up the weights if you're not actually contracting, squeezing, putting stress, putting tension on the desired muscle if you're just going through the motions. And in time, I did learn towards the end of that year. It was when I went to university, actually. I went to a different gym and I had a new gym buddy there. And they were really helpful, really patient, really helpful, much more experienced with lifting weights than me, muscular guy. And he really, really helped me an awful lot. That's when I knew how to get the form down. And actually, in some cases, he was telling me, no, you have to lift lighter weights because you haven't got this nailed first. You're not doing it right. And I was like, oh, wow, really? And then I'd go to a lighter weight, I'd correct my form, and wow, I can suddenly feel my chest activating far more so than when I was just going through the motions without the correct form previously. So in time, you learn to place a lot more emphasis on the form, as I did in that first year of training. But yeah, good form, that comes first before any progression with the weights. Now, the advanced part, the deeper part of this is there are exceptions to that. This is the caveat. There are times when opting for a heavier weight will compromise form. Because it actually still could be the advantageous thing from a muscle building perspective. But that already assumes that I've got the form down and I'm doing things safely and I know what I'm doing and it's very considered. So that's for me now. Like, I wouldn't say this to myself if I was a young Rye. If he was a beginner, when he was a beginner, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say move up the weights if it costs you good form. I can say that to myself now because I know the range where form becomes unsafe, dangerous, completely unproductive. So I can maybe compromise sometimes. I can go for that PR, that new personal best, and maybe that will yield really decent muscle growth returns. And I can be willing to sacrifice 15% of form. But that's more an intermediate advanced weightlifter stage that you have that kind of intuition, that kind of feeling, that experience to know where those boundaries are. So there are exceptions, but generally speaking, get the form down first. That is step number 4. You want to train with intentionality, get the form down versus just going through the motions, going in the gym and showing up. So you could do all the other 7 steps right that I'm going to cover in this live stream. You get your protein right, you could have the appropriate calories for you, etc., etc., etc. And you could still not make gains because you're just going in the gym, going through the motions and expecting, why am I not building muscle? Like, I'm doing everything right. How's your training? How's your training? Are you actually working the muscle you're trying to work? Can you feel that pump in the bicep once you've finished that bicep curl? Step number 5, progressive overload is the key driver of growth. So once the form is down, like we've just been talking about, you're not just moving weights randomly anymore. It's time to think about progressive overload. More reps, more weight, better control of that weight over time. If you're not getting stronger, you're probably not growing. So this never going to happen unless you're a beginner, of course. For me now, I don't get stronger in every session. It's months and months, actually, realistically, in some cases. Sometimes it's painfully slow because, again, I'm trying to do things the slow and steady way, the slow and steady way, You know, I'm not in this huge calorie surplus where I'm getting massive PRs all the time. The development, and I've been doing this for so long, like the development in terms of more reps, more weight, etc., is much, much slower. But as a beginner, you can really move through the gears very, very nicely and much more speedily. So generally speaking, in those beginner, certainly maybe early intermediate stages, if you're not getting stronger over time, you're probably not building muscle. It's very hard to build more muscle without getting stronger. It is possible. And again, if you're enhanced, performance enhancing drug stuff, and you're a total newbie, these are exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, you're going to get bigger if you get stronger. It's going to force the muscle to grow. Again, we've already had the form has to be down conversation. This assumes you've got good form because you could be getting stronger with bad form. You're not going to build muscle because you're not actually working said muscle. Makes sense? Remember as well, high protein ain't going to save the poor training. High protein is not alone going to do anything for the progressive overload. You need to be in that gym intentionally, like we talked about in step number 4, getting the form down. I'm not just going through the motions. I'm trying to feel that muscle as I'm working it. Step number 5, though, is I want to see that maybe not every single session, week to week, month to month, progressively over time, I was doing the chest press with 30 kilos. Now I'm doing it with 40. In a couple more months, I want to be making sure I'm doing 50. That is what's going to explode your results. Protein, getting 150 grams of protein a day, if you're not doing this, waste of time. Honestly, waste of time, bluntly put. Again, protein has other benefits beyond muscle building, but from a muscle building perspective, all that emphasis on the other stuff, you're getting everything right, but you're not progressing in your strength over time. Your reps aren't going up, and then later you're picking up a heavier weight. Total waste of time, honestly, if I'm just putting this bluntly. People don't push themselves to failure. I see in the gym again, they're going and lifting the same weights, 12 kilo bicep curls for 10 reps, then they put the weights down, and I'm like, you ain't even sweating, mate. You could push yourself harder. Again, if you're not serious about this stuff, who am I to judge? That is, what's the hair doing? That is totally fine. But if you are serious about this, if you do really want life-changing muscle building results, you need to be going in that gym. That hair looks worse now. You need to be going in that gym with intentionality, with the required. It was so easy when I just slicked my hair back, guys. Do you remember? Because it was like Lego on my head, just this big waxy jelly bomb on my head. But yeah, you're just going in. You're just going through the motions. We want to hit the PRs, is the point I'm trying to make. If you do want to build some muscle, bottom line, you need to start pushing yourself. You need to start pushing yourself. You're not just going to the gym. You're moving those weights intentionally. You're trying to get stronger over time. Step number 6, carbs are surprisingly underrated for muscle building. Yes, protein actually does the muscle building, the muscle and tissue growth and repair. Yes, we know this. We've covered this already. And that's what everyone obsesses over. I'm not going to say it entirely wrongly, like rightly from a muscle building perspective. But let's remember the carbs are the thing that fuels performance. If you've got low glycogen because your carbohydrate intake is really low because you're doing keto or some nonsense, you're going to have weaker sessions, poorer stimulus. Again, the progressive overload is less likely to happen. You're less likely to be able to push yourself to failure consistently or near. You don't have to be in failure to build muscle. I should make that clear as well because I didn't mention that earlier. But you're less likely to have the ability to push yourself to near a failure to help you build that muscle. Poor stimulus. You're not going to signal muscle growth. So higher carbs, better performance, more ability to overload the muscle, add more training stimulus, more likely to grow, basically. So pre-workout carbs, they really do matter. Don't want to go into the gym flat. I have to think about this a lot, and I'll explain why in a second, but I don't want to go into the gym flat. Pre-workout carbs I want are fast digesting things like fruit, rice cakes. What have I had this week? I had a couple of Medjool dates before the last session. I did one session at light night last week, so I don't think I needed any fast carbohydrate source then because I had plenty of carbohydrate over the course of the day anyway. But what else? Trying to think. Oats are a bit slower digesting, so I would never use oats as pre-workout fuel right before a session. If it's like 2 or 3 hours before, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, fresh fruit, rice cakes primarily, to be honest, is what I use. But sometimes dried fruit can be really useful as well for something fast digesting. Because these things, yeah, they're topping up your glycogen within 30 to 45 minutes. You're getting a little blood sugar boost from them in about 15 minutes. Some of these things with a really fast digesting time, assuming that you're not combining them with too many things. Because you start adding that fat and protein, that slows down the digestion. That's not to say you shouldn't eat that food or it's bad, but using it as a pre-workout fueling is going to be kind of redundant or futile. Does that make sense? So this is why I never... Sometimes I do it accidentally because I don't know what my schedule's going to be, or I end up spending longer on a task or less time on a task with work than I think, or I'm out and about doing stuff. I would never intentionally have a very fat and protein-rich meal pre-workout. Not because they won't be beneficial in other ways nutritionally, but just they'll be redundant from a fueling perspective for the workout. Does that make sense? Again, maybe this is granular. Maybe this is a more advanced level of detail because you don't need to be paranoid about pre-workout nutrition is my generalist view. And if you're already eating high carb, your glycogen stores are going to be relatively fullish anyway. So you don't need the same emphasis as I've just stated on, fast digesting carbohydrates. But, and this is why I'm mentioning this, but what you realize when you get really lean is all of this matters more once you're really lean, when you're really lean. When you're really lean, it presupposes that you don't have as much glycogen in your system ready to go to fuel you, or around the clock anyway, consistently over the day, as when you're not lean and subsequently likely eating more calories and thus carbohydrate. Makes sense? So again, there's a lot of presuppositions here about, like, you can be in a calorie surplus still on a low carb diet, on keto. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's an exception to what I'm saying. But generally speaking, there's more fuel in the tank for pushing those weights, basically, the more calories you're eating. So when you're lean, and therefore it's implied that you're eating fewer calories, this, like, pre-workout nutrition, I think, becomes really, really important. It feels it to me. Yeah, carbs are a massive part of this, is what I'm trying to say. I'm just getting lost in my notes here. Carbs are a massive part of this. So yeah, the leaner I get, the more I feel that my sessions are more susceptible to being flat, hitting fatigue earlier, feeling lethargic, low energy. That affects your mood as well. So some of it's psychosomatic. It's not just physiological, but you go into those sessions and you're not quite as fired up, quite amped up, quite as positive about that session, quite as ambitious with the weights you're going to lift, hitting those PRs, etc., etc. So yeah, I still like, obviously, my slower digesting carbs over the course of the day. I'm not a person that's like, oh, I only eat my carbs around the workout. I don't agree with that. I'm still eating those slower digesting things like whole grains, potatoes, etc., over the rest of the day. I still eat fruit and rice cakes maybe at other times of the day. But for me, the leaner I've got, the more I've realized that pre-workout meal, maybe an hour before the gym, really, really matters. And carbs are a massive part of that. So that's why, even though they don't do anything for the muscle, from the protein, muscle tissue growth and repair perspective, carbs don't do anything. They're futile in that regard after the fact. But carbs are really underrated for the whole process of muscle building, because they help you have better sessions, in other words. And this is even more important to me the leaner that I've got. I'm going to have to fix this hair, guys. I'm due for a haircut in a couple of days, actually. Thank goodness. Now the Patrick Bateman slick back has gone. How do you guys like the new cut? Maybe not right now. So I'm being insecure about this now, aren't I? But that is really a mess, an unprofessional mess. So that's why it bothers me, even though I'm being insecure about it. Step number 7. Yeah, this is another one. You don't need to be in the gym every day, right? How often do you need to go to the gym? How should your workouts look, etc., etc.? Should you do full body programming, the gym bro, push, pull, legs, etc., etc., chest and arms together, split? How should this look? First thing I'll say is 2 to 3, even 2 initially, sessions per week is absolutely enough for a beginner, because, like I say, you're going to hyper respond anyway. Even now, after all this time, I've got like 10, 11, 12 years strength training. To be fair, it's totally on and off. It's come in drips and drabs and phases. But even now, I still only tried to count myself at 4 sessions per week. So 2 to 3 is absolutely all you need as a beginner. When I go above 4 sessions per week, incidentally, I can feel my recovery is compromised and I'm actually not as strong. In other words, at a certain point, going to the gym more, I don't think is actually better. It makes me weaker if I go to the gym 5 or 6 times a week. Even though I love it and I love exercise, going to the gym 5 to 6 days a week, when I've run that experiment in past, it makes me weaker because I'm not having as much recovery time between those sessions. I'm more likely to be able to employ that progressive overload principle we spoke about a few steps ago when I'm going to the gym less often. Of course, at a certain point, if I'm only going to the gym every month, then my strength is going to decline. But it's assumed that maybe the minimum is 2 sessions per week. Well, that could actually be really advantageous to you versus 4 sessions. You might think more weights lifted, more time in gym, more opportunity for muscle growth. Only up to a certain point is the point I'm trying to make. Also, I want to say, needless to say, the plan, like, adherence is really important. So the best plan is the one you actually stick to. We know this. That's a common cliche, common trope, but it is so true. So maybe for you, 2 times full body workouts every week on Tuesday and Friday, for example, maybe that is going to be perfect for you because it's a busy schedule. And setting the bar any higher and saying, oh, I'm going to do 4 sessions per week and I'm going to split the body parts up so I don't have to do the full body workouts. Maybe that's not actually the best play. It might be more optimal in some way. That could be argued. It's not necessary, but it could be more optimal from a muscle building perspective, because then you can spend more time on each individual body part, do more exercise, more volume for that body part. Maybe that could be argued. But actually, if you can't stick to it, if you're not going to stay consistent, that is not a debate that even matters. That doesn't even matter as a discussion, does it? So yeah, the best plan is the one you can actually stick to. All I'm doing is sharing rules of thumb and what's worked for me. So I've landed at 4 sessions per week. I think a beginner can make absolutely brilliant gains on 2 to 3 sessions per week only. That's all you really, really need. But you should also consider, what am I actually going to stay consistent with? What am I actually going to stay consistent with? For some of you, maybe you've got a bit more time on your hands. You're a little bit more flexible. Maybe you're a student. There's a gym on your campus that's already subsidized, it's cheaper, then why not do 4 sessions in the gym per week, and then you can spend a little bit of time on each body part. That might be more effective for you than just 2 sessions per week. But pick the plan you can actually stick to and you're going to be consistent with. If setting yourself the bar of going to the gym 4 times per week leads to burnout, leads to taking time away from family time, your work, and then actually it quickly falls apart after 3 weeks, there's nothing wrong with doing 2 sessions per week. Don't make it some binary thing where you're like, oh, I've stopped going to the gym this week because I'm so busy. So, oh, that's it. The house of cards is falling down now. I'm going to fall out the habit. I'll quit my gym membership. No, just say to yourself, 2 sessions is enough. 2 sessions a week is enough. Maybe I just need to dial things down and add body parts together so I'm doing more in those sessions. Maybe I'm willing to spend another 15 minutes in the gym. Now I'm only doing 2 sessions per week versus 4. It's kind of obvious stuff, but I don't think people do it. I don't think people consider, hey, what can I actually stick to? What's realistic? So worth saying. But again, I remind you here, final point on this before we move on to the last step, number 8. I remind you here, the important thing is you train right? Intent form, and you employ that progressive overload. You're getting stronger over the time. You're hitting PRs. You're doing more reps, subsequently heavier weights over time. That is way more crucial than nitpicking over, am I going to do 3 or 5 sessions this week? Am I going to do my legs on Wednesday or Friday paired with my shoulders? Or should I do them on their own on Sunday morning? Like, all of that is less important than training correctly with proper form and adding weight over time. Does that make sense? So again, I'll kind of want a hierarchy over the course of this. You have to do this by taking notes. I kind of want a hierarchy, the most important factors. And so training frequency over conversations around training frequency are actually futile if you're not hitting the PRs. It's kind of what I'm trying to say, and getting stronger and training correctly in the first instance. You could be in the gym every day. If your form is bad, if you're not getting stronger over time, the guy that's in there twice a week, he's having huge recovery time. He's coming back in. He's got his headphones in. He's playing Linkin Park on the heavy lifts to make sure, yeah, I hit the PRs. He's going to make more progress than you, even though he's in the gym 20% of the time you are. Yeah, absolutely. That's possible. That's possible. And lastly, then, step number 8 in my now not so secret strategy to build muscle on a plant-based diet. Finally, remember that muscle gain is painfully slow, right? People get this wrong, right? Weight loss is comparatively supersonic, and this is really worth keeping in mind. Muscle building will happen very, very slowly. It will. And you actually want it to be honest. If the scale is jumping really, really quickly, and you're looking at that as proof that, yes, I'm adding muscle here. Muscle is much heavier than fat, and the scale is going up. If the scale's going up really quickly, though, that ain't muscle you're gaining, or it's not exclusively muscle you're gaining. It's fat. It's fat. Of course, the exceptions are beginners. And once again, I say enhanced lifters on the old special magic juice, because different rules apply for those folks. They can add pounds and pounds of muscle in a much shorter time frame to the average natural lifter. For everyone else, though, we must be realistic. Don't judge progress like you do with weight loss. This is something I had to get my head around. I'm like, if I'm only adding a couple of pounds of muscle every few months at maximum, that sounds so rubbish, to be honest, compared to the amount of weight that you can lose in just a couple of weeks. But the way that can enhance your physique and totally change how you look, the recomposition that can so dramatically transform your physique when you stack months and months of progress together, just slowly, just quietly. That is a really great feeling. That is a really great feeling. But if you're somebody that is so scale focused and you're looking at that as a measure of how much muscle you're building, I'll warn you against that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Make sure your lifts are going up. Make sure you can feel, oh, my biceps are hugging this t-shirt sleeve a little bit better now. Make sure you're doing it. I know it's subjective, but based on your look in the mirror, your reflection, okay, I think I am adding some. It can be difficult, but I am adding some. That is way more important than the scale going up and up and up. And if it's going up too quickly, like I say, you're not just adding muscle, you're definitely adding fat. So there's your warning sign that you might be taking that calorie surplus a little bit too far. So summary then, because we're an hour in here and I've waffled a lot and I was paranoid about my hair for a good 5 minutes there. We're all human. Even Mr. Cocky Ryan Adams is worried about his hair sometimes. A few reminders here then. Yeah, just as we finish. It's not a plant-based versus meat discussion. I'll get loads of comments about that. I'll get loads of comments from those carny types. Man, get over themselves. Stop wasting time on other people's channels that you're not aligned with. It's so bizarre that people do that. So I would never do that and write comments so bizarre. It's not plant-based versus meat. One is better than the other. It's not. It's this. Train consistently. Get stronger over time. Eat enough, especially protein and carbs. Don't eat too little. Don't eat too much that you're gaining loads of fat. So eat an appropriate, a sufficient amount of protein and carbs and your healthy fats as well. Stay relatively lean in the process of building muscle. And if you do those, whatever 4 or 5 things, focus on those key things long enough. Don't get too lost in the minutiae, the small details. Focus on those bigger picture things enough. You'll build muscle, plant-based or not. And that's the secret. And that's how I've done it, slowly and progressively. Yes, my progress will have been much faster if I was in that calorie surplus, if I only cared about building muscle. I wasn't so paranoid about putting on fat as well. I don't think I have a remarkable muscle building transformation, but these are the 8 steps from based on my experiences. I was thinking about making this live stream that I wanted to share today. All right, what are the big things I want to talk about? These are the 8 insights that I came up with. I am considering, guys, putting together a small case study test program around this. So if you're already at or very close to your ideal body weight, but you still feel a little bit soft, or even you got that skinny fat look, as though actually your weight on the scale is really light, maybe you're much leaner than before, you're really light, but you still feel like, I want some more muscle, I still don't really have the shape to my physique that I would like. Like I say, I'm considering helping a small group of people with this to see if this has potential as a full-scale program alongside Slim and Sustain. So yeah, if you want to build muscle properly, if you want to do it on a plant-based diet, I'm going to put the form in the description box below. You can fill that out to tell me you're interested. I'll be in touch with all the details as this unfolds about a potential here case study test program. Let me know any follow-up questions in the comments below. I'll get to those in the next 48 hours or so. Thanks for your time. See you in the next one.